Basically, God cares for His people. That is the message that comes across in today's readings. He feeds them not only with material food, but also everything the people need for a fully human living. It is in union with God, the source of life and the goal of each one. Today's gospel passage serves as an introduction for a long discourse on Jesus as the bread of life. In the next few weeks, we'll be hearing more about this. Before the actual multiplication of the bread, the gospel passage of today, we have a serious information and introduction to set the stage that Jesus is the bread of life. The crowds had gone before Jesus on foot. The evangelist John says that it was because they saw the signs that Jesus was doing for the sick. This is like an expression of the deep hunger and longing of the people for healing and for their spiritual food. It is the wholeness of life. It's not a physical hunger merely. At the same time, it could also be interpreted as a kind of sense of curiosity from the part of the people. After people had gathered, Jesus should have taught them and cured many of them. The gospel passage today does not mention anything of that sort. The people were with him for so many hours that they were hungry physically. And we will not be any better to only to know about what the multiplication of bread is if we mainly focus on that. We are told first that Jesus went up the mountain. It reminds us of Moses on the mountain bringing the God's law to the people. Moses taught the people with his God's law and later on he fed them. But here Jesus speaks on his own right with the same authority as his Father. And just as Moses gave the people the teaching from God and later he fed with manna, here Jesus also, he taught the people and later he feeds and takes the bread, the loaf, the fish and he feeds them. John also mentions that the feast of the Passover was near. The Passover is a great feast for the Jews. Every year they celebrate their liberation from the land of Egypt, the liberation from bondage to the liberation to the promised land. And Jesus also is kind of anticipation of the Passover, which will be accomplished by his own suffering, death, and resurrection. Just before Jesus' death, he gave his people the Passover, the action that we see in today's gospel, that the breaking of his own body and giving his own blood. We also find some kind of similarity between the first reading and the gospel. It's like we have Philip in the gospel reading, that they have some kind of interaction, some kind of dialogue between Jesus and Philip. Also we have the first reading, this dialogue between Elisha and God. He's told to feed from the 20 barley loaves to 100 people. How can I serve these to 100 men? He asked God. God says, give it to the people to eat. And then all the 100 men were able to eat. Then Andrew breaks in. There's a small boy here with 5 loaves and 2 fish, echoing the words of Elisha. But what use is that for so many? Presumably the boy brought the food for himself and for his closer ones. The next thing we know is that Jesus has taken these loaves and fish, blessing them and being distributed to the people. The little boy was able to share with others, where the strangers also could eat. Some say that miracle took place was because of the boy's generosity. It resulted in some others sharing their own food, what they might have brought, sharing from their own food, breaking away from the self-centeredness, from their own concern and security. In today's world, people are hungry, people are in malnutrition in our world. Maybe it's not because of lack of food, maybe because of lack of distribution. And there's also another detail worth noting here is that in other Gospels, Gospel of Matthew, Mark, and Luke, we have that Jesus, after blessing these loaves and fish, He gives the disciples to be distributed to the people. It's a reminder of their own ministry to the people after the death of Jesus. But in the Gospel of John that we heard today, Jesus himself distributes to the people. And it's a kind of anticipation and declaration from the part of Jesus that he is going to be the bread of life. The bread of life to each one of us that he'll be giving to the world. It is to emphasize that Jesus is the source of all nourishment and source of all life. The teaching is that Jesus is the true source of nourishment for our lives. If we want to share that nourishment, we have to be prepared to enter fully in the life of Jesus. The pastoral mystery, the sharing of love, and the self-giving of suffering and death. Jesus, by his divine power, was able to satisfy the physical and spiritual hunger of the people. In today's world, we come across so many people, millions of people undernourished and under malnourishment, suffering, hunger, famine, and poverty. Let's ask God today to give us life and nourishment day after day, to us, to our neighbors, friends and relatives, all the people in poverty, in famine, in hunger. May the same God, in his love and mercy, continue to bless you today and every day. Amen. Let's rise and confess our faith.